Today is the fourth in our series called Grab, Gather, and Grow. And that title comes from the home study groups that are based on the sermons that are meeting each week. For our visitors today, I will tell you that our series, Grab, Gather, and Grow, is a series based upon questions that the founder of our style of Christianity, John Wesley, used in his small groups back in the 1700s when he lived. Mr. Wesley lived in a time when there was great disparity between Christians for the Church of England and all of the rest of the people. So it's weird for us to think about, but in John Wesley's time, the law was that if you were a landowner, or effectively, we might think of it as if you were eligible to vote, you had to go to church. You had to belong to the Church of England. That was the law of the land. And that led to a religious experience that was empty and devoid of purpose because it didn't breed passion in people, and it also caused them almost inalterably to feel better than the rest of the society because they had land or they had title or they had power, and so they were worthy of being in the church and worshiping. John Wesley deconstructed that in his time, and as he did, one of the things that he continually fought was the attitude of arrogance within the church and church officials. One of the most famous scenes in his life is that when his movement started and he was asking these 21 questions in groups all over the London area, and the thing had caught fire a little bit, his bishop called him in and told him to stop it, to knock it off, to just take care of his duties at the church and to leave the rest of it alone. And Wesley said, I would, except for this one thing. God has called me and he has told me that the world is my parish, right? Which means I'm going to continue to preach and to teach and to ask these questions wherever I go, because I see everybody as equally in need of grace. And I guarantee the Church of England did not see everybody equally in need of grace. They believed coal miners and the underclass socially had a much greater need for forgiveness than they did, so there was an imbalance. These questions really want to root that out of the new movement as it started. So today we answer the final 7 questions, and to be honest with you, they are rude and much too personal. So I have chosen select people from the congregation I'll be answering on your behalf. In each answer, in each question and answer, there is this week a component of forgiveness that is necessary for the person answering the question to be able to move in their answer in the right direction. I think that's just fascinating that at least in my mind's eye, as we go through these really personal questions that are all about whether or not we're arrogant in the practice of our faith or arrogant about ourselves, that the key to changing to be able to answer the questions the way we would want to is that we have to learn to literally and actually forgive, because forgiveness itself is an equalization. If you're angry at someone because they've done something bad to you, the first mindset that you have is they are worse than me. They did something bad, right? And so I am better than them and they owe me an apology. If you get to forgiveness, if you work the steps and come to a point where you've forgiven them, that mindset has to change to, they did something that I full well know I might have done also. That's much more equal, and it is really the seed of being able to open up your heart to receive the fullness of the gospel. Are we okay on that? Okay, great, super. All right, first question, do I thank God that I am not like others? Yes, I do. But not in the way that I think the question means it. I think the question picks up on the New Testament parable that Jesus told of 2 men who went to the temple to pray. One, a wealthy landowner who prays effectively, "Dear God, thank you for all that I have and all that I am, and thank you especially that I'm not like this guy down the way a little bit who's kind of stinky." The stinky guy prays at the same time and says, "God, forgive me, right? I am unclean, I'm a sinner before you, and I need your power to wash me and make me whole." So Wesley used this question, I think, with that biblical episode in mind, and the point of it is to ask ourselves personally, do we think that we are better than other Christians, right? So thanking God that I'm not like others. And again, I've been confessing all 3 weeks to whatever level I can bear it. So I will tell you that I am guilty of this, especially denominationally. Right? When I answered the question, when I thought through it and prayed it, I am guilty in my own inner life of being dismissive of people in the hierarchy of the church who I think of as politicians, not Christians. And even that language that I just used tells you that I do, in fact, feel superior to them on some level, and that isn't right. Right? So it calls me to heal when I have to answer that question out loud with you, and it calls me to examine my own heart. So even people in an institution who are doing things that are counter to what I would believe are human beings in a world awash with sin, and they're people who are trying in their own way to make things better. They're just not trying in the way that I think that I would try if I were in the same position. So I do sometimes thank God that I'm not like others, and I need to work towards a mindset and a heart set where that isn't true, where I can put that kind of prejudice away. Here's what I have an inkling of. I can't tell you from practical experience, but my inkling is this: if I'm able to achieve that and I'm genuine about it, I'll bet you that my ideas or my thoughts get a much better hearing than they have up to this point. Because I think people who have those positions understand when they meet me, just it kind of, I think, flows off of me, that I am kind of disgusted with the higher-ups. If I had more of a servant's heart and if I had more true humility, there's a possibility they would lean in and listen much closer. So did that make you uncomfortable for me to admit that? No, huh? Remember, if I'm doing my job well and if you're doing your job well, you'll feel every bit as uncomfortable as I do. I think we all occasionally look at people who are really doing or living or acting in ways that are counter to what we consider to be right. And we do thank God that we're not like that we're not that far gone, that we're not that enmeshed in whatever it is. And when we pray that, we've forgotten one of the core principles of Christianity, which is that all have fallen. All are in need of the saving grace of Jesus Christ, and we don't get to count or measure who needs more grace and who needs less grace. Everybody has fallen, and that is the reset point for Christians. When we, like our young family today, when we stand in front of the church and take our vows of baptism, we are saying that we understand we are equal with everyone else who's ever served Christ, and what we need is His grace and to serve Him. So equality and forgiveness of the things that I am unhappy about with the denominational officials would help me to answer that question in a better way. I will tell you it goes the other way also. In my 30-some years of being a pastor, I have moved from kind of having, and this will shock you, a competitive nature with other pastors. When I was younger, to this age, I really have no competitive nature at all with other pastors, especially within United Methodism. So I went from going to the large gatherings trying to brag about my churches or to say how much growth we'd had or what new program we were doing, that kind of thing, to look better than other pastors when I was a much younger man. At this age, I go to those gatherings and I mostly don't participate, except for I try to look around for somebody who is obviously stressed and spend time with them, because what I know is that ministry, whether it's going well or whether it's going bad, it's a really it's a tough way to make a living. It's a hard thing to pursue the calling of God. Churches can be really difficult for pastors, and just the weight of the responsibility is so. I've lost what used to be a sense that somehow I needed to out-achieve those around me, and I have gained, with the passing of the years, a more ample heart for how hard it is for everybody. And there are times when I will sit at a conference and have coffee or talk with somebody who is doing things in their ministry that I think to myself, well, if you would knock that off, it'd go a lot better. But that's not my purpose to tell them, right? It is just literally to be a presence with them and to assure them every pastor goes through really difficult times, and you're no different, right? It's how you decide to come through them that makes a difference. So there is progress in my life on that. I bet you already know there's a lot of progress still to be made. Question 2. Are we there already? Question 2? Yeah, okay, great. Am I consciously or unconsciously creating the impression that I am better than I am? In other words, am I a hypocrite? Yes, but you're not allowed to use that against me. So I know that you will understand this. I was raised with kind of an odd dynamic. I think it's a normal dynamic, but it is an odd way to look at life. It wasn't so much a matter of whether we were good or bad. It was a matter of whether we embarrassed mom or we didn't embarrass mom. Does that make sense? So we could poke each other and do whatever we wanted to, kind of in the car or out of the public eye, and she mostly didn't interfere. She just let us wage war on each other. But if someone from the outside who would judge her or judge us was present, we knew you better toe the line or there's hell waiting for you after they leave, right? So it was kind of deeply bred into me in my growing up years to have a crowd of vague they in my mind and to always be thinking about what they will be thinking when I'm out in public. Does that translate? Does that make sense to you all? And I have noticed in counseling over the years and in talking with other people that same kind of situation where we walk around and we worry that they, whoever they might be, will see something bad in us or they'll make fun of us or they'll embarrass or put us in a situation where we're embarrassed to be like we are. So we dress and we talk and we act in certain ways just to keep the naysayers at bay and not to give them any ammunition. That's an interesting way to think, isn't it? It's a warfare mindset, right? If every day of your life you're going about your business worried mostly that someone would see something about you that they could then pass on to someone else and say bad things about you, then you have been beaten to the point where you really do have a warrior's mindset and you're always in defense mode. Everything you're doing is in defense of your self-esteem. And the reason we get that way is because all of us, to a certain extent, chase the idea that if we could just be better than other people, that it would manifest in our lives having meaning. So if everybody's trying to be better than everybody else, it's a natural thing to think, well, I can't give them any ammunition, right? I don't want to embarrass myself. I'll cover up the stuff that I've done wrong. I'll nuance or just flat out lie about other things in my life because I don't want the great vast humanity to think poorly of me. It is a type of insanity to go about life that way because here's the news. I know who they are, and they don't care. They don't care to give a fair trial. They don't care to give an accurate judgment. It doesn't matter what you do. If they decide they don't like you, they're going to say whatever they want and turn anything you've said or done in their own wicked ways. So it makes no sense to try to protect yourself from what they think because they are in a state of brokenness and they'll think what they want to think. Does that make sense too? The better course then, and I think the power in the way that we practice Christianity, the better course is to try to build in our minds a different idea of who we're going to please every day. So if when you're preparing for the day, you're thinking, how might I please Christ today? How might I practice my faith today? How might I be a grace in someone else's life today? Because I want what God thinks about me to be what I want Him to think about me. Then you've transitioned to a state of life that gives you an opportunity to really have a wholeness and a fullness that you can't have if you're trying to convert and please humanity around you because humanity just won't give in. If we move from recognizing that fault in ourselves, that we are hypocrites because we're trying to play the game with and for each other, and we move to an intentional spot where we're trying to please God and trying to figure out how to live the way He taught us, we've made a significant step in our ability to be whole and in our ability to be satisfied and in our ability to actually love other people. Without making that move, there's almost no chance those things are going to happen. I had a friend once who is now in ministry as an independent pastor back in Colorado, and his story about the church has always been one that resonates with me. When he was a layperson at a church in Arizona, he and his wife, he said, would on Sunday mornings always go to church because they led a class on how to be happily married. The trouble with that, of course, is that they would get in the car on Sunday morning for about a 35-minute drive to church and call each other horrible names and scream and yell and threaten divorce and do all kinds of nonsense. And then he said they would turn into the church driveway and both pipe down, right? They'd be quiet, and then they'd get out of the car and hold hands, and he would kiss her on the cheek whenever they saw the pastor, and they'd sit in church all happy and lovey-dovey, teach the class on how to be happily married, and then go home and go to war again. And he said that he went and talked to his pastor and told him, right, we're perpetrating this fraud, and we need some marital counseling. And the pastor removed him from his office in the church. He was a board member of the church, and asked him to quit teaching the class, but never offered counseling, because the pastor was protecting the image of the church, and he didn't want their divorce to dirty the church. That was the point at which he decided that the kind of Christianity he had been practicing, which is plastic Christianity, where people put on a front and just try to be what they're supposed to be on Sunday morning so that other people don't have ammunition against them, that's the day that he decided to give that nonsense up and to become a more genuine person and to seek out a church where he could be honest. I like to think that here in Visalia, we have the kind of church where you can be honest, and where if your humanity shows, instead of being condemned, we will walk with you to the best of our ability until Christ can help you to straighten it out. Next question, do I confidentially pass on to others what was told to me in confidence? No. I consider that to be one of the most sacred of trusts as a pastor. And in fact, if you have met with me, there are sometimes, if I'm not clear if it's something that would be passable or not, something that I could talk about with anybody else, a health concern or whatever, I will often ask, do you want me to share this with other people or do you not? Here, let me show you an oddity that happens in ministry. It is the case that ministers know a lot about people's personal lives, and that really is a beautiful and sacred thing, and I consider it to be one of the highest honors that God bestows on people who are clergy. But it is the case with that knowledge that with some frequency, and I've talked with other pastors about it, and they have the same experience, there are people who demean and say horrible things about the pastor, that the pastor shouldn't be a pastor, that they're not up to the calling, that the church would be better off with them, that kind of stuff, all the while expecting the pastor to continue to hold the secrets that they have for their lives. And when I talk about that with other pastors, we all kind of come to the same agreement. That is, in fact, the test of your calling. Right? If you can watch someone say untrue things about you and demean you and try to ruin your reputation while you know things that would unwind them in their setup in society, if you can hold that trust, then you should be a pastor. If you can't, then you shouldn't be. Right? And I'll tell you further, it's just mind-boggling sometimes, but it isn't all that difficult. And it isn't all that difficult because the fulfillment of a calling, right, that God has put on a pastor's heart is such a sacred and beautiful thing that it helps people to be able to rise above kind of what you might think of as their natural or their base selves, and sometimes do things that are pretty incredible. And really, for most pastors, that's one of them. You have a sacred trust with me, so when you're in my office or when you're talking to me, if whatever you are saying you don't want anybody else to know, you can bet it won't be known by me, no matter what's going on beyond the walls of the office. I surround myself with people of the same bent, right? So that there are a handful of people in my life who I know I can tell anything to, and they'll not repeat it to anyone else. I have a sibling who I can speak honestly about life's struggles with, only one, right, who I know will not then turn around and talk to other siblings. They'll keep it, they'll pray about it, and they'll just let me speak to them. It's a really necessary part of life to have someone that you can trust, where you can open up and say it like it feels. And the reason for that is a lot of times that helps us come back from a crazy place. Right? If you have someone who's safe to complain to or to tell your story to, and you tell it how ugly it is in your mind, but you do so safely, oftentimes, at least my experience is, just saying the words makes me understand how far I have my own self gone wrong and how much spiritual work I have to do in the situation. So to have trust in this life is almost the rarest of things that pass between human beings, and I am glad that I can earnestly answer the question. I do not confidentially pass on to others what was told me in confidence. I would say to everyone here, if you find yourself being left out of the loop a lot, It could be that the circumstances that cause other people not to share things with you are that they have noticed too often that you don't keep them inviolate, that you share them right away and with a certain glee. So it's an odd manifestation of the Christian faith, right? Christians are supposed to want to be close to one another and to have close relationships, and the pathway to that is to be a safekeeper for people who need their stories or their parts of their life kept safely. Okay. Am I jealous, impure, critical, irritable, touchy, or distrustful? Let's see. I think it's a multiple choice question. I'm going to go with irritable. Am I jealous? Not so much anymore. And I think this is normal for most human beings. I sure was when I was in my 20s and 30s. And again, that's a part of my upbringing. We were poor growing up, and my mother, with some frequency, would talk about even areas of town as being for the rich people. And if we would go shopping for school clothes or whatever, if I chose something that was too expensive, she would say, "What do you think we are, rich people?" So as a young man, there was a clear divide in my thinking between myself and people who had means. As life has gone on, that divide has changed greatly. And I do not share my mother's opinion that because someone has more stuff than I have, that I should be jealous of them. Because I've had the opportunity over my lifetime to see people with a lot more stuff and a lot less stuff. And it turns out stuff doesn't make any difference. Sometimes people with a lot of stuff are very happy and kind and generous and giving. And sometimes people with a lot of stuff are just the opposite. It isn't the stuff, right? It's the person. So I've lost that kind of jealousy. And within ministry, I've never really been jealous of another pastor's skills or success or whatever. Competitive is not exactly jealous. And I can't think of anything else that I would be jealous about. In fact, I think some of what irritates people about me is sometimes people are trying to make me jealous and I don't catch it. Right? They're trying to rub my nose in something, but because it's not the way I'm cut, it's not the way I think, I just blunder on and go forward. So, all right, impure, critical, irritable. Sure, absolutely. Impure can be taken lots of different ways, but since this is a time of confessional, absolutely, right? So in my life, I have harbored thoughts that human beings shouldn't harbor. I've thought about desire to hurt people, whether that be physically or emotionally or in whatever way I could think of, right? And those are impure thoughts. And I am aware, again, as I age, that the more I play to those when I'm in a bad place, the more I let kind of the childish, immature part of me rule the inner life, the less I am able to serve God or feel like I'm in God's presence. Critical, it depends. Right? If you're making a mistake that I've made, I'm not critical, I understand. If you're making a mistake that I haven't made, I kind of think like that you shouldn't have made it because I haven't made it. Does that make sense? Yeah, I know. Well, I was going to say, my mom also has a word for that. It's called jackass. But it is true, right? So if I've been through some kind of storm, even if I caused it, right, even if it was my fault, and then I see a friend going through the same thing, I'm not critical. I don't say, "Oh my goodness, how could they have done that?" Because I know how they could have done it, right? And I'm more than willing to help. But again, I'm thinking with church officials at the denomination level, a lot of times I find myself thinking, "I don't get it. I don't understand how you could mess that up so badly." And that is critical. It is critical without having stood in those shoes, and it's critical in a way that doesn't bring anything positive, right? Nothing in my life has ever been improved when I say to myself of another person, "Can't believe they messed that up." It doesn't make me better. It demeans them if it gets back to them, and it hurts me to be that way. So I do know that I need to be less critical, again, in my relationships within the church and try to heal my own self inside so that instead of being critical, I can be prayerful and approachable. Am I irritable? Yeah. You don't really need any explanation, do you? I'm as sweet a man as you're ever going to find, but I apparently don't look like that. It's true, right? I have a serious countenance, so people read me as irritable. I'm not big on public displays of affection, hugging and rubbing people. And if you watch the evening news, you'll know. I hope every one of you has said, my pastor's a genius for having developed those. Yeah. So, but it doesn't make me irritable. I am not really irritable. I'm not angry most days. Most days I'm really at peace. I'm also an introvert, right? And people either don't know or they forget. Introverts are happiest when we're quiet. So I can be at a party or be someplace, and people can be laughing and joking around me, and I just sit there like a bump on a log, but I'm fine, right? I'm not really angry. I'm just happy to be in the company of people who will carry the conversation so I don't have to. Let's see. Touchy or distrustful? Yeah, I get touchy, and I get touchy in truth most of the time when there is unfinished work going on in my heart, right? So if I have reckoned with something in my life that I need to change, if I've had to confess and maybe work forgiveness for others or for myself, right? If there's something in transition inside, and I'm just not feeling great about me or about the situation, then I do tend to be more touchy. And I read more into people's actions and reactions and voice tones and those kind of things because I get super sensitive because my energy is being used for something else. And I try, especially in my marriage, to operate by a basic principle. So when I feel myself getting wound up inside, so I know I'm going to be touchy, I try to tell Marilyn, and I do most of the time, right? Here's the deal, honey. I am in a kind of a bad place, and here's what's going on with me. So I know you're going to hear sharpness in my voice, and I may not pick up the conversation right, and I might be pretty touchy. So if I bark a little bit, please know it really isn't about you. And you would be amazed how taking the time to say something that simple and true before the irritability shows, how healing and good it is for the marriage, right? Because then she has permission. Effectively, I'm telling her, you don't have to take it seriously. I know right now I am touchy and raw, and it's going to come out on you, but you have permission just to ignore it and go on. It's a really healthy thing that we have discovered with one another. Am I distrustful? Yeah. If you look, talk, act, or otherwise take on any of the main characteristics of the man who abused me when I was a teenager, I am automatically in a distrustful place. And that's horrifically unfair, right? Because you can't help how you look and the way you act, the way you tilt your head, those kind of things. Those are natural, but I have become aware of it. Even at 55 years old, it's still true, right? So if somebody registers as Don Bean in my mind in any way, shape, or form, I immediately slot them in the be very, very careful. I want to do better on that, and I think that I am doing better at that, giving people a chance to kind of show themselves before I enter full distrust. But really, in my life, that's the main area of distrust. If you know anybody who's been sexually abused or raped or those kinds of things, I think we all carry that as a part of our scar tissue. There are certain people, situations, language or words or whatever that put us in a place where the walls come up and we're not as trustful as we were before. Again, my own sense is that having forgiven Don with the 4 steps worked many, many times, I have more still to do, right? I need to go back through until that forgiveness is deeply rooted in my heart and I can get over the distrust. So it's kind of a flag, right? It's kind of a sign that says I'm not done with my spiritual work in that area, that I can recognize easily in myself that those things are still a part of me. Next question, am I honest in all my actions and words, or do I exaggerate? I might have told a golf story or two in my life. Of course, I'm not honest in all my actions and words. I don't think any human being is, but I pride myself, and that's probably just another sin to add to the list, I pride myself on being a man who will speak straight to you. So people who come to see me for counseling or people who come to talk to me just about different things in their life, almost all of them approach me and say somewhere in the first few minutes, I came to you because I knew you would tell me the way that it is, right? I knew you'd be honest with me. And by that, they mean blunt. I don't have it in me. I don't have the skill set to kind of figure out how to make a simple point, stop that, into an hour-long conversation where you're guessing about what you should do or not. At least that's how it looks to me. I am a relatively plain-spoken man, and in that, I am honest. I try to be honest about myself, and I try to be honest about other people. And as forgiveness has become more and more a part of my life, that honesty has changed too. I find myself finally, again, very late in life, but I find myself finally when someone has done something that hurts me or angers me or that I'm in strong disagreement with, I find myself being more honest in my description of those situations when I have to describe them in this way. I am more prone now at this age to say, I can understand why they would have done that, and I don't think it makes them a bad person, but I am in disagreement with them. And for me, that's a huge step forward because it replaces, they did that, then I can't stand them, right? That's my 20 and 30-year-old self, and that really has changed too. No, it's just a human being who's done something that crosses my line, but I'm not even positive that my line is the right one. So I am glad in my own life to see some work going on there. I'm not big on exaggerating because I don't do anything that you can necessarily exaggerate about. I thought about that a lot. What would I really preached that sermon. I wrote a bunch of words today. I have, so anyway, my new goal in life is to find something to do that I can't exaggerate about. But really, I don't know. I don't know. I told you that it wasn't really me that helped win all those city championships in baseball, right? So I didn't even exaggerate about that. So I don't know. Next question. Is there anyone whom I fear, dislike, disown, criticize, hold resentment toward, or disregard? Absolutely, positively, 100%. Big area in my life. Anyone whom I fear. Again, if people show the characteristics of other people that have hurt me in the past, I do enter a stage of fear. In fact, my own history, because of the abuse and those things, I categorize life as safe or not safe. Right? Different people categorize life or see situations in different fields depending on their background, and mine is safe or not safe. Right? And I am less and less in the not safe, which is lovely. But I am still there too often, and I am there too quickly when I get there. There is no one that I really dislike, but there are people who I choose not to have relationship with. I've talked about my sister relatively openly. I don't think, honestly, that she's a worse person than I am. We just can't be together. It's just poison for both of us. And I hate that, but it's true. But it doesn't mean that I dislike her or that I feel like somehow I'm better than she is. It just doesn't, for reasons I can't discern, mix with us. And there are certain other people in life where it is the same way, where it's just not going to work. And so it isn't necessarily dislike as much as it is an understanding that at this point in life and with our various scars, we just hurt each other. We can't help each other, and I try to stay away. I don't know that I own anybody, so I couldn't disown anybody. That's a bizarre thing to me. Criticize, write a sermon, bring it to me, and I will enter full criticism mode. Really, it's it's the area where I criticize the most. And if you don't know, I suffer through these things my own self, right? My rule is I have to watch every sermon that I foist upon you guys. So I criticize equally. Do I hold resentment toward or disregard? Yeah, I do. Less than before, but that's hardly any consolation. Have you made the transition so I'm no longer talking about me and I'm talking about you? No? Great. Well, go to one of the classes. Last question. When did I last speak to someone about my faith? Just now. I speak to people about my faith in sermons, in grace groups, in disciples, and in other ministries all the time. But for me, I took that question to mean outside of my role as a clergy. And the opportunities for me to speak to somebody about my faith when they don't know that I'm a clergy are very limited. Right? Because most people are introduced to me as Pastor Steve, so that's how they come into the relationship. But yes, I do, and I do with some frequency, including with my family, with my nephews and nieces. I have found it a great joy to be able to leaven our conversations with talk about faith in a way that I hope that they can hear, because I'm using kind of family language and reinterpreting stories for them. But I truly think of sharing my faith as being the same thing as sharing a great recipe for a pie that I loved, right? My faith is my life. It has been everything to me, so I am happy to have the opportunity to share it time and time and time again. And I would hope that that becomes true for most people as they pursue their relationship with Christ. So God created us to be corporate, to be communal, and over history, human beings have developed a keen sense of being able to read other human beings and to know what they are thinking and to know what they want and to know what the rules are, so that we could fit into a community because we're safer in a community. The trouble has been that with the fall of man inside the community, once we're secured inside our own tribe or our community, then that natural impulse to want to please others and to pass muster changes into competition to want to lead and be the boss and have our way, and that is the heart and soul of sin. These questions that we ask these 3 Sundays and that we ask in grace groups and disciples and in Grab, Gather, Grow are really good antidotes to the curse that kind of we share, right? Which is we know our tribe is Christ, right? People who follow Christ. But we also need to become aware of what it is in us that can destroy the bonds that hold us together in the tribe of Christ and in this community, and work together on them so that our community is a place where other people will understand what it takes to be a part of us is not kind of a false put-on self where they've hidden all of the humanity, but we are a church and a people where your humanity is in fact what makes you feel at home, because you see lots of people struggling with their faith and trying to grow in grace and their understanding of it. Amen.